Welcome everybody, this is Mr. Ever, APUS History, Sandwich High School, and we're going to do a little review here and give you some ideas about free response questions. So basically the premise here is that free response questions make up a significant part of your essay portion of the AP exam. You will have 4 free response questions to choose from, and you will have 2 to answer within 30 minutes for each. So let's give you some practice now. So basically this video lecture is going to be a little bit different. I'm actually going to just read the PowerPoint here for you because I really want to go over a couple things. So if you want, you can sit back and listen. You can follow along with the PowerPoint. So what we're going to look at first, okay, is understanding the essay prompt. And I found this great piece of PowerPoint work by Keith Wood in Utah, APUS history and English teacher there, and I'm gonna have to thank him on Twitter for this. So let's jump right into it. Okay, so all AP essays are written in response to an essay prompt. You guys know the prompt, it's the question, right? Understanding what the prompt asks you to do is the first important skill you'll need to acquire. Well, that's kind of obvious. So here are 2 examples. First, how successful was organized labor in improving the position of workers in the period from 1875 to 1900? Analyze the factors that contributed to the level of success achieved. Okay, that's a DBQ prompt. That means that in the AP exam they'll provide you documents to answer that. And here's a sample free response, FRQ prompt. Compare and contrast United States foreign policy after the First World War and after the Second World War. Consider the periods 1919 to 1928 and 1945 to 1950. Of course, both of those are after the first 2 world wars. So let's take a look at some of these prompts broken down. So first tip. The first thing you need to do is to read the whole prompt, every word. This is especially true if the prompt is in 2 sentences, like this one. Okay, so let's go back to the DBQ example that they gave you. How successful was organized labor in improving the position of workers in the period from 1875 to 1900? Analyze the factors that contributed to the level of success achieved. Well, here's big first mistake. The first mistake many students make is reading and answering only part of the prompt, and that would be either the first part with the question mark or the second part, analyze the factors. So you have to do both. Okay, tip number 2. Having read the whole prompt, circle or underline verbs. Now verbs are really important because they'll help shape your thesis statement, but they also help determine the nature of the question that's being asked here. So here, how successfully was organized labor in improving the position of workers from the period 1875 to 1900? Analyze the factors that contributed to the level of success achieved. So the first important verb is in the second sentence, analyze. Okay, after finding the verbs, look carefully and mark any conjunctions. Circle or underline them. For instance, compare and contrast. Okay, and consider the periods 1919 to 1928 and 1945 to 1950. You must compare and contrast these periods successfully to complete the task. Doing only one or the other will lower your score. Okay, tip number 4. Go back and look carefully at the verb in the prompt. This word will tell you what you are expected to do. If you remember, our word was analyze. So the following is a list of commonly used verbs and explanations for the tasks they indicate. These are verbs on the College Board that they've used recently. Analyze, okay, explain how and why something occurred. Any question that uses how and or why is an analysis question, even if the word analyze is not in the prompt. So how and why focuses on analysis. Assess the validity. This is another very common one. I've seen this in maybe a dozen or so DBQ questions over the years. So validity refers to truth. How true is the statement? The statement doesn't have to be all true. It can be true in one instance or circumstance and false in another. So assessing the validity could focus on this idea that some parts of history are true and other parts aren't. You can reflect both. So let's take a look again. Evaluate. Which factor was most important? You usually need to rank several events or factors and specify which is most and which is least significant. Okay, evaluate is really important. It's a higher order thinking skill. And what it means is that you have to discern, you have to judge between many different factors. Okay, to what extent? To what extent is also, like assess the validity, is a very common phrase that's used in DBQ and FRQ prompts. So this prompt frequently requires you to specify a cause and effect relationship and then state which causes were more important. Okay, it's sometimes easy to think about this as to what extent something happens, meaning did something happen from a very strong point of view, a very weak point of view, or somewhere in between. Okay, compare and contrast. To do this correctly, you need to discuss both similarities and differences between two events or periods. It is important to both in a balanced way without shortchanging either. So the other words that are often used are discuss or consider. So these are frequently used in free response prompts. So they should be written as analysis essays. Okay, and if you remember, analysis essays focus on how and why something occurred. Okay, so tip number 5, after you are clear as to your task, so whether you analyze, evaluate, etc., sketch out a quick informal outline of how you are going to proceed. This is very important to guaranteeing that you cover the whole prompt. Personally, this really helps me quite a bit. I tend to be a visual writer, so almost every time I have to write anything, I have to diagram it out before. So, for instance, if you were writing the following prompt, compare and contrast the foreign policy after the First World War and after the Second World War. Consider the periods 1919 to 1928 and 1945 to 1950. So let's diagram that out. So, because it's a compare and contrast, okay, it's easy, and I like to think of this as a 4x4, 2x2 grid. So you might jot down a simple outline like this on the right. You would list things that were similar in both periods, then list things that are different in both periods, and then your essay would either have 4 body paragraphs or 2 with each of the sections broken up. I like to do 4 personally myself. Okay, we notice we have the 2 time periods on the horizontal, and on the vertical we have the similarities and differences. Okay, or you might have 2 longer and more involved paragraphs as indicated by the 2 ovals. Now, if this is the case, then you focus on these terms from a broader context. Okay, just focusing on the similarities and differences in one time period and in another. In either case, you would have organized your thinking so that you cover all of the material you need to cover to address the prompt completely. So, we're going to wrap this video lecture up very quickly. So the summary is you have to read the whole prompt, mark the verbs and the conjunctions, think about the verbs, consider the whole prompt, and organize your thinking before you begin. Now, I'm going to jump into the second lesson in a second, so stay right there.